All right, let's go ahead and get started with our next session. So I'm going to be covering our last session of the day, and today's going to be mostly, well, this session rather, is going to be mostly focused on some of the changes between Laserfiche 9 and 10. Now, some of you are already on Laserfiche 10, but most of you are still on Laserfiche 8 or 9, and or some of you are actually upgrading from 8 to 9, and this will be something that you'll want to take a look at in the future. But what I want to do is I want to show off some of the new features in Laserfiche 10 and why we think that they're really valuable and we think you should consider updating your system in the very near future. We're going to be covering a brand new activity within Workflow, which is the document creation via Word. And so we'll be taking a look at a sample process of how you can utilize that particular activity. We're also going to be looking at changes in Web Access 10, which had a big user interface update. So it's going to look a lot different, but I want to show you all the positive aspects of that. We're also going to be looking at Forms 10, which we got a preview of, and there's going to be a deeper dive into that tomorrow, but I want to highlight some of the features so that you know what questions to ask, particularly in our webinar tomorrow and going down the line. We'll also be taking a look at Laserfiche Mobile, the new Laserfiche Mobile 9.3, and some of the changes in Weblink 9. For most of the people here, they're not actually utilizing Laserfiche Mobile, but this is kind of a pitch to all of you that have access to Laserfiche Mobile to start using it. There's a lot of great features, and I really want to highlight some of those things today because we think it's a really powerful program. We think it can unlock a lot of really cool interactions with Laserfiche going forward. So first off, the biggest change in Workflow 10, and there's a bunch of them, but for me the biggest change is the Update Word Document activity. Now this activity, what it'll do is it'll generate any type of document, which is a permit, a form, agenda, letters, whatever, any sort of document that you're currently using Word to create, and it can basically generate this document off of a template that exists within your system. Any token that is taken from a workflow process can be implemented into a Word document, and with a process that I'll show you here in just a second. So what you'll be able to do is find and replace these strings of text with tokens and metadata that's already in place in the Laserfiche system, and then merge those fields into the Word document. So there's a lot of language there, but in terms of what the activity actually looks like, that's what it looks like. You can't miss it. It's the Word document. It's the Word icon that is now an activity within Laserfiche Workflow. And what the activity will do is it'll open a .doc or a .docx file and perform a series of modifications based on the metadata that you're tying to that particular document. The activity will pull the data from Laserfiche, Forms, Quick Fields, whatever product that you're using, and then populate within that Word document template stored in Laserfiche. And there's a ton of applications. I'm going to show a sample business case, and then we're going to get into talking about some of the other applications and kind of go from there. So the application that I wanted to discuss today is a site survey. So what is a site survey? Most of you, even if you're not involved in the process of putting together a site survey, most of you are intimately aware of what information is included in a site survey, and you're aware of the process that the field workers actually have to compile that information. The professionals in the field will have to document their observations of the site and then upload those to whatever document they're writing on. Now, typically, they're just scratching them down on a pad of paper, and then they'll go type it into a Word document when they get back to their office. These observations are going to be entered into an editable document that can be worked on by other professionals, have pictures be added, given to other people to work on to add their specific pieces of information like your layouts, your legal language, things like that. But in this case, the field surveyor on site would actually enter this information into a Laserfiche form. So just like we saw in the last presentation within Eric's presentation, what was happening was he as the person that was entering information into the form was actually entering metadata into that form that would then be used by Laserfiche. In some cases, the form itself wasn't necessary, but it was just a process from getting information from a user that maybe doesn't have the ability to upload information to Laserfiche themselves, or doesn't have the technical prowess to interact with a form directly, interact with Laserfiche scanning or dragging and dropping directly into the system directly is what I mean. But in this way, they can be given direct access to a Laserfiche form with very specific directed questions that make it very clear what kind of information they need to enter. And some of that can be multiple choice, like your radio buttons, your drop-down menus, things like that. So if you have a section of sites that are currently being surveyed, the user could just, that could exist on the SQL table, and then that could be pulled directly from the SQL table into a drop-down menu. But in this instance, in our sample business case, the surveyor would be on site, on their tablet, their laptop computer, their mobile phone, whatever has been provided to them. They're entering the information on that particular device into the form, but this could easily just be done through Laserfiche scanning or quick fields. And then forms would gather that important data, like the address, the owner, the questionnaire, any questions that need to be answered, or any attachments like plot layout, pictures, things like that, from the surveyor, and then push that into the form. Now, when that form gets into Laserfiche, the workflow will gather the fields from that submitted form. So here's an example of an initial site survey. We've got, and you can't really see that very well, but we have a number of pieces of information like the owner, the town, and then a couple of sample questions that are asked on typical site surveys. Well, what workflow will do is it'll take those fields, that information that's been entered, and merge it from the submitted form into a Word document template. So basically the process of highlighting it, hitting Control C, and then going into the form, and then putting the spot where you're supposed to put it, and hitting Control P, or Control V rather. That process is handled automatically by the workflow. It's going to gather the completed document, and it can store it in a new folder. So if multiple surveys need to actually be submitted in order for a complete survey, survey packet, then multiple people can enter their surveys, they can do their work. Of course, it can kick off different forms to gather different information and still be stored within the same in-process folder, but then when it's done, workflow will gather all that information, take all those different forms, grab the merged metadata, and then merge it into the Word document template, create a new folder, new place for it to go, and then store it as a Word document or as a TIFF or PDF. And it will handle that conversion automatically. So that's a lot of, I mean, for those of you that are intimately involved in the site survey process, that was a lot of information, but I think this is going to make a little more sense as we kind of dive into this. The Word document creation requires that the template is filled in with the appropriate fields. So we have to make sure that we're asking the right questions in the template or in the particular form. And then once that occurs, a new entry is going to be created with an entry name and destination that can be generated via tokens, which anyone that has worked from the workflow designer, all of this should look very familiar. You're just basically entering the same kind of information that you are before, but you're adding that extra task and then attaching an electronic document at the end of that task. So Word document, the template can be located either within the Laserfiche repository, or it can be selected as a server attachment. So it does not necessarily have to exist within Laserfiche. Some of you may want to basically keep these templates outside of Laserfiche to make sure that no one can mess with it, even if they have admin rights, and it only exists on the server for the administrator. So that is an option, but you can still get to those templates and still have workflow merge fields from that template if it's from that Word document template if it exists only on the server. Then this is going to look a little bit complex, but it's a lot easier than it looks, I assure you, because I did it. And if I can do it, trust me, any of you that work with Laserfiche can definitely do this. But what you're going to do is you're going to set up a simple field merge. Anybody that is used to working with mail merges is going to find this process really familiar. You set up your spots within the Word document, and then merge the fields with the template data that has been gathered from the form, from Laserfiche, from quick fields, what have you. Once it's merged, it looks a little like this. basically your not coding, but the information that you're requesting, okay, on the actual template document itself. And I made these directly from Word. But you're basically taking that information and then you're grabbing it from the form when it's being submitted. And so what I did was I submitted a form that was an invoice request, okay, so PO request. And what we did here is I just went ahead and I submitted, the item number from the company that I'm purchasing this from, a scanner, which by the way, the C225, small scanner, it's only $425, nice desktop model. You like this? I liked working the different things in. And what's that? That scanner right there? It's not that scanner right there. It's a different one. I should have used that one. That would have been clever. So you can. So I've uploaded the unit price, and Workflow has done the calculation for me, and then put in the total price there. So what we're looking at is a way that we can gather information from a form and input it into a template that I don't have to go through the process of building. Now, there's other reasons that you'd want to do that. So any document that's going to have a consistent format or structure is a really good candidate for this process. So contracts, right? Contracts have lots of legalese that we can't touch, that we as individuals can't touch. And I know this because each and every one of you, when you start working with us, basically submit, we sign a contract. Well, I can't touch the legalese in that contract. It's generated for me, and then I go ahead and I input the pertinent information. Who is signing the contract? What organization is signing the contract? Is this represented? And then what you're buying, right? So I can't touch the individual legalese, the non-disclosure agreement. I can't mess with any of that because I'm just an employee that doesn't have the ability to do that. But this is a good way that if you want to generate something with that legalese, okay, you can have that template exist on the server, fill out a form, or fill out or have a process, invoke a business process, and then have that Word document basically sent to you in an email that you can then push on to the person that actually needs to interact with that. So you can do this for PO generation, correspondence. If it can be something as simple as letterhead, that you just want to be able to fill out a piece of letterhead, an award that you want to send to somebody. Maybe that's a certification that they're passing, or even a permit, something that is constantly being sent out outside of your system, but you want it to look nice. This is a good spot for that particular process. And then we're actually implementing it for statements of work because we've got a lot of things that are involved in our statements of work, but we just want to update the actual project that we're going through. And then, of course, legal paperwork, like I said. So any questions? I mean, there are probably a lot of questions. This was a very, very brief overview of this particular process, but I think that you can see there's a lot of power here, and it's just determining how best to utilize that. Does anyone have any ideas of how they could use a process like this offhand? And that's available to the people at home as well. Nothing? Well, I'm getting nothing online too, and there's about twice as many of them as there are people in here, so don't feel bad. It was
appointment letters. We have a standard format letter appointing employees to a new location, and it would be really easy to plug in.
Okay, great. So the example that came from the room was appointment letters. There's a standard format when new appointments are made within the organization or transfers are being made within the organization that are automatically sent to those particular individuals, and this would be a good way to generate those and then send them out easily. That's a great example. Anyone else? Yes?
We are looking at automating our contract process and also standardizing them so that we have similar language and date format and things like that as well.
Sure. So again, contracts. A lot of your organizations certainly have different departments where different departments have different language in your contracts, and right now maybe it's a little bit of the wild, wild west where you are just putting, you basically put in the things that are important to you, but maybe don't consider the needs of other departments, and there's no standardization there. This would be a good way to standardize your contract structure, to standardize the language within those contracts, and then go ahead and make sure that users that are sending out contracts are always sending out the same exact contract language every single time. Another good one that just came up was new clients. For those of you that have clients or maybe new appointments, I see a couple of individuals in the room that actually have clientele. You can send out welcome kits, standardized language letters or congratulations that are just basically typed into a quick form, and then that generation of that welcome kit can be automated and sent out without any additional work. So all great examples, and feel free to keep this in mind because this is a brand new activity in Laserfiche 10. So when you update to Laserfiche 10, you will have access to this activity, and I invite all of you to think of ways that you can interact with that. Oh, we have a question here. I'll go ahead and take this. Can someone be able to search similarities in these documents just like searching a Word doc? So that's a great question. And the answer is yes, because this is a Word doc, right? So it's generating an actual Word document. And in the example of my site survey, that is something that is intended to be generated by one person and sent to others for further editing. So this is an actual Word document. Now, if you did want to go ahead and convert that into a PDF or a TIFF, you certainly can do that, but that's another step. And what this is going to do is just generate that Word document. New employee documentation. It's another example. So rather than belabor this particular process, and of course, if anyone has any questions at the end, we'll be taking plenty of questions at the end, but we're going to go ahead and move on to Web Access. So within Web Access 10, there's going to be a few things that we're going to go over today that I want to highlight. Now, there's a lot of changes in Web Access, and as soon as we're done here, for those of you that are online and those that were not able to be here, I'm actually going to be sending out a document to almost all of our clients with all of the changes and granular changes. So there's going to be some things that weren't covered here that are a little bit more, well, not as much fun, I guess would be a good way to put it. So, so you'll be able to see some of those changes as well without having to spend time covering it today. But within Web Access 10, the first thing you're going to notice is a completely overhauled user interface. It's got a brand new look document viewer, and it's also a lot more responsive on your desktop, tablet, and mobile devices. So and you also have some new user tools like your favorites and discussions and tasks, and we'll get into that. First thing I want to highlight, and I know this is really important for a lot of organizations, is Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Laserfiche has spent a lot of time and a lot of effort making sure that they meet these guidelines, which if you have more questions, we can send you out some data and some of the compliance guidelines. But this is a process that they make sure they go through to make sure that people that have some difficulties interacting with technology, people with disabilities, physical disabilities, mental disabilities, can still interact with the system. And I know that applies directly to some of our cities and counties that employ some individuals such as this, and this does apply to mobile access. So if you need some record of the compliance of this particular product, just let me know and we can get that to you. So here is what Web Access 10 looks like. Now, for those of you that have used Web Access 9 or Web Access 8, this is going to look a lot different to you. First thing you'll notice is a big change in color scheme. It's a lot cleaner, and in fact, if you've been keeping up with Microsoft products, you'll notice that Laserfiche has kind of mimicked some of the look and feel of Microsoft products. That's by design. It's not just something by happenstance. They want to continue to feel very familiar to Windows users and users of the different Microsoft Office products. So you're going to see a lot of similarities in the functionality, and that's a big selling point for them. So in terms of user interface updates, a couple new buttons that you'll notice down at the bottom. Documents in use. If you have multiple documents open in different pages, you can quickly see which documents you actually have in use and jump to those documents, which if you're like me and you open 200 pages, much to the chagrin of my IT department, who would like my computer to actually perform appropriately, that is a good way to filter through the things that you want to look at and go ahead and close some windows out or find that information quickly. Another useful feature is the starred feature. Starred works very much like a bookmark or a favorites tab, so you can basically click on your starred button and find all of the documents that you're frequently working on within the system. Okay, this is really useful because you can actually star folders as well. So if anything that you're constantly finding yourself going into, if you star it, you'll be able to quickly jump into your favorites, your favorite places within the system without having to go through all of the browsing and searching. There's also recently opened documents. You want to see a history, a brief history of the things that you've been working on. Recently opened documents is a nice thing to do, especially if you're like me. When you're done with a document, you close it, and then you close out Laserfiche and go, shoot, I didn't get all the information I was supposed to get off of that, and then you have to go back and find it. That's a great way to get that information, get back to that information quickly. And you'll also notice that outside of your folder structure, because everything down there at the bottom is actually independent of your folder structure, there is a separate recycle bin. For those of you that have multiple recycle bins, this is probably going to feel a lot cleaner because that recycle bin is going to be based on user credentials. So if you're utilizing your Windows authentication, then what you can do is basically you can make sure that the only person that has access to those recycle bins are the people that can actually visit the recycle bin. That will also go ahead and go away if you don't have access to the recycle bin, so you won't even be able to see that particular option. But this eliminates the need of having other recycle bin folders within your folder structure. Now you can still have intermediary places for users to dump documents that they want deleted, but just know that they have an option that is outside of the folder structure now, and we find it really valuable to know that. A couple of other differences aside from the basics. You'll notice that all of the icons are different, and I'll show you some examples of different documents and what they look like. Everything is going to still remain relatively familiar from Laserfiche 9 in that you have your TIFF and your PDF and your Word and Excel and all of your different file formats, and each of them have a different icon, but they're going to look minimized. And what I mean by that is it's not going to look quite like that particular icon, where in systems past or versions past, it would basically just show exactly what you would expect it to see if you had it on your desktop. So that exact icon, just smaller for the purposes of your repository. That's no longer the case, and so be aware that those look a little bit different than what you're used to. But it's a little cleaner and probably a little more pleasing to the eye. And same thing with all of your different folders. Everything else that you're familiar with in terms of interacting with your different columns and all of your user preferences, those all remain the same, and interacting with all of that remains the same as well. Big difference is, especially if you're used to using the thick client and you're converting over to using web access, is the big buttons that you're used to in the thick client for the scanner, for OCR, they're not big in web access. In fact, you probably haven't even noticed them. Up in the top right, you'll see all of the icons that serve as those buttons that you're used to seeing in the top left all the way across the top within the thick client and even within web access. So they're very small, and I want to make sure to highlight this because this could possibly be the most frustrating change, especially if you're an administrator. If you don't prepare the users to know this, you're going to get a lot of emails saying, I can't find the scan button, I can't find the OCR button, I can't find any of my buttons, what's going on? So if you alert them to the changes there, you probably won't have that issue, but I just want to make sure everyone's aware that that is probably the biggest UI change visually, is how small and how separated those buttons are. It cleans up the interface and makes it a lot nicer to look at, but people will probably ask where they're at. But you'll notice that all the buttons are exactly the same. In fact, Your scanner button still looks like a scanner. Your import and export buttons are exactly the same. Your email button is now a default button up in the top. So if you want to email a document or a folder out, just simply highlight it and click the email button. And then you'll notice the kind of more selection there at the right, and you can still add buttons, add custom buttons to your web interface whenever you want, and that can still on a user by user basis. There's also an integrated template view. So your template looks exactly the same, but it's going to be a little bigger, a little cleaner. Your metadata is going to be a little easier to access when you have a document highlighted. Here's an example of a document viewer. Again, similar concerns there in terms of the annotation buttons. All of them are a lot smaller and a little more minimalistic. So certainly want to highlight that. In this case, you'll notice a slight change in the way that highlights and redactions look. Although of course redactions will still be actually redacted for your users that don't have the appropriate security access. But everything else is going to look and feel very similar, even to the thick client. You still have your templates, you still have your annotations, your annotation views, you still have your metadata views. A nice change is over on the right-hand side. It's just been condensed a little bit for your annotations, your processes, and your records. All of that metadata is a little cleaner, a little easier to look at. Before we move on to Forms 10, any questions about the web access user interface? I know a lot of it was just kind of administration type stuff, but I want to make sure that everyone feels good with that before we move on. And there's no questions before we jump into Forms.
Are the starred and recent documents features then only available in web access and not in the client?
It's a great question. So the question that just came in was, are the starred and recently opened documents only available in web access and not available in the thick client? The answer to that question is no. Starred and recently opened documents are available in the thick client within 10 as well, but that is specifically a 10 feature. So that's not going to be available in 9 or 9.2, which I'm sure those of you on 9.2 are acutely aware. So anyone that wants to utilize those features, you're going to have to upgrade to 10. But I will say that they're a lot cleaner and a lot easier to use within web access than they are on the standard thick client. The thick client is going to look and feel very similar to the thick client in 9. Any questions? We don't have any questions online either, so we'll jump into, oh, gosh darn it, just as I say that, get another question. Question online is, can you confirm that in Web Access 10, users can drag and drop items from Outlook into the repository? The answer is, of course, yes. All the drag and drop features are still there. All of the integration features from the Microsoft Office suite of products are still there and should still work exactly as you're used to. Good question. So Laserfiche Forms 10. We're going to be looking at a couple of things. I kept wanting to ask Eric about these things because I saw them up on the screen. I just wanted him to expound on this further. Again, this is going to be an overview that will then do a deeper dive tomorrow in our Forms 10 webinar, so definitely tune in for that. But we're going to highlight a couple of things that I think are going to be the most valuable from a user and implementation perspective, whereas they're kind of going to be just another thing to look at tomorrow. We're going to be looking at some of the improved workflow integration, specifically the operational dashboard for all of the administrators, some of the new fields available within Forms. We're going to do a brief overview of Teams, and then basically that you can draft forms and come back and work on forms that were previously worked on. So your improved workflow integration. There's 2 new activities within workflow that apply directly to forms, and they are invoke business process and set business process variables. Now, what does this mean? I can see Deb falling asleep, so I just kidding. So I know that sounds really boring, but it's actually really exciting. What we can do now within Forms 10 is kick off a brand new form, a completely different form from a submitted form. So to unpack that a little bit, what that means is a user can submit a form. Let's say it's going back to our AP processing and the request to pay an invoice. Well, maybe that form doesn't actually go to the person that needs to be paid or that goes to an approver. Maybe that actually just passes along information that was input into that form and then fills that into another form and then sends that along for more information to be gathered for digital signatures, for things like that. That's what you can do within Forms 10. So you can kick off a brand new form and have that sent out to a new user as part of your automated process, and those are activities found within workflow. So this is going to be something that as you're going forward, if you're interacting with forms in a meaningful way, we're going to talk about a lot. Because ultimately what you're going to be able to do now is instead of having a user as part of their task send out a new form or assign a new form, Laserfiche can do that automatically. And it can assign forms to different users, to different teams, and it can do all of that automatically. So a good example maybe is a FOIA request. Somebody outside of the organization, and for those of you that don't know, Freedom of Information Act is what FOIA stands for. Maybe somebody outside of the organization submits a FOIA request. Well, obviously, the FOIA request form is not necessarily going to be useful to the user inside the organization that then has to interact with that. That they have different tasks, they have different questions they need to answer. So that FOIA request form, which is very simple and very general, is going to be sent to a user that now has to interact with that. And a new form is sent over to that user with a new task for them to, drag and drop or copy over a document into their form, fill out the appropriate metadata, fill out additional email addresses or additional things that maybe people even need to pay for that, and that could kick off a new kick off a new form where an individual has to now pay for something using our forms payment integration, which by the way is available and was created by Cities Digital. If you want more questions about that, let me know. But you can do a lot with these simple processes. So keep that in mind, and as you're considering how forms can be useful in your organization, remember that we can do these things and we can kick off these forms automatically, and it's very, very exciting. In terms of your operational dashboard, you already got a nice, good long look at this. I want to highlight a couple of things. Obviously, the user interface is going to look a lot different, and what we're looking at here is more of an administrator view. But some of these things, like like some of the processes, are going to be hidden from the users that don't have the ability to access that type of thing. You can show details, action history, summaries. All of that is now available to the user in a very simple way, as well as your different task list. But you can also see your drafts over here on the left-hand side. You see your drafts. You can see your history. What have I submitted before? That's going to be useful to the user that's interacting with these forms a lot. For the user that is submitting a form a month, 2 forms a month, some of these features are going to be a little bit lost in them. But for the user that's interacting with these forms a lot, these are going to be really helpful tools to make sure they're not losing track of all their work. And in terms of what the operational dashboard can also provide, it really is the ability to find bottlenecks, just like within workflow. One of the reasons we implement forms and we implement workflows is to eliminate these bottlenecks and these collections of tasks and information where people just forget. And we've got different things that we can do, like escalation tasks, reminders, and those are all well and good. But what we can do now with the operational dashboard is acutely identify where the problems are in our process and fix them. And if it's a user just not getting to their stuff quick enough, well, can whip them into shape, which I know is probably music to some of your ears. The reports are also a lot cleaner and going to relay a lot of information a lot more quickly. And this is another element of Laserfiche's interest in the way that Microsoft works. If you ever take a look at some of their Dynamics products, which for those of you that are in cities and counties, I highly recommend you consider looking into Dynamics CRM. It's a really interesting product, and we actually have a couple of users here that are involved in it. But the usage of very visual reports is something that is inherent in those products, and I highly recommend taking a look at those. But this shows some of the influence of Microsoft for sure. As far as new fields, we've got two that I want to highlight. The biggest one is a geolocation field. Now this is really cool, but imagine that you have somebody in the field that you want to grab their exact longitude and latitude when they submit that form. That's what the geolocation field will do. It'll directly coordinate, directly grab coordinates off of a device that has GPS enabled. So this may not necessarily be all that helpful for some of you, but for those of you that are have users that are working in the field that have to interact with this stuff, this could be really useful. Imagine not having to describe, if you have a public works employee, not having to describe where a service request is coming from, but just inputting the longitude and latitude so that you can find exactly the exact point of where they have that service request. That's what you can do with geolocation. We have another potential client that I'm working with where what they want to do is they want to find out where their employees are when they submit their service reports, just to make sure they're actually on site. So not necessarily applicable for all of your businesses, but it's a cool feature and it could be applicable. Another addition is the ability for these different forms fields in the number, text, date, and currency fields to actually support some calculation. Now, this is a little bit more technical, but being able to calculate age from a date field is a good example of what you can do here. So calculating dollars spent in expense reports, things like that are now possible directly within the form instead of uploading it to workflow and having workflow run that calculation. It's a lot quicker, and then you can get a direct and immediate response off of the information that you're entering right away. Another thing I want to highlight is Laserfiche Forms Teams, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It enables tasks to be assigned to a number of different people that all fall under a team. Now this can be identified as a department, as a group of people within a department, and what's nice is that the team tasks can be visible to everyone within that team. So if you have a client services team, if you have a public works team, and I just need somebody to get to this task, and it's first come, first serve, you can assign it to the entire team all at once. And the first person that gets to it and closes that task out, they got it. Of course, you can also assign things to individual users still, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a team, but certainly you wouldn't want everyone to fill out, one person to fill out an entire team's payroll status update. That doesn't make any sense. But as a manager, you can also make sure that you're assigning tasks in an efficient manner. So this is a really useful tool for anyone that is using forms with a wide variety of people in different departments. This is a good way to make sure that everyone gets these tasks all at once. And here's a quick look at what some of those teams look like from an administrator perspective. We've got Team Awesome here, and Team Awesome has different security roles within that team. And then you can update descriptions on what those individuals are. This is nice for the administrator that isn't necessarily 100% aware of each and every individual within that department. You can let the administrator of that team actually upload that information and get your users to do some of the work for you. Some other additions to Laserfiche Forms is administrator instance monitoring, being able to track each and every individual process that is coming and going through forms. Instantly loading the next task, just like with the new workflow activity. What instantly load next task will do is it'll allow you to go from one form to the next form or the next task in that process. If it's something that has to be done immediately, Forms will automatically load up that next activity that you have to complete without just assigning another task and making the user click on it. It'll pop open with that new form or that new task right out of the gate. Some Canvas enhancements, which we took a look at with Eric, make the grid is a lot cleaner and a lot easier to use. So if you're actually interacting with the process modeler, it's going to feel a lot more intuitive. And mobile preview, which actually isn't new. It was available in 9.2, but not 9.1 or 9.0. So a lot of users kind of forgot about it. But what you can do is you can actually preview what your forms are going to look like on mobile devices simply by clicking the preview button and assigning the different device. And it's got a whole host of different devices in there, so you can see what it looks like on a Samsung Galaxy Tab 1, 2, and 3. What it looks like on a Galaxy S3, S4, S5, and iPhone 3 and iPhone 4S. You can get really specific on what different device you're actually using. So if you're going, well, I know what it looks like on an iPhone or an iPad, but what's it going to look like on all these surfaces I bought? Well, you can actually see exactly what that looks like. Any questions on Laserfiche forms before we jump into the next thing? Again, a lot of these are going to be focused on tomorrow with a much deeper dive, but I just wanted to highlight these changes, especially if you have some questions that you think about before our webinar tomorrow.
And on the calculations feature, we're thinking of using this for our election judges qualifying tests. Is it possible for forms to calculate basically the grade?
Ooh.
How much of those were correctly?
That's a really good question. So let me repeat the question. Make sure if I miss something, just holler at me. So the question came in is they're thinking about using Laserfiche forms for election judges. So I'm assuming they have a questionnaire that they have to answer, and the answers will equate to whether or not they're viable as an election judge. And so there's a grading scale on that questionnaire that will be put in place. Can the calculations task actually handle that grading and produce a grade automatically? And I actually don't 100% know the answer. I know that what we can do, because we've done this in the past with some HR tools, which in this case is more of an application process, where you've got different terms that are being looked for in the application, like bachelor's or master's, or different jobs, like for me, sales, solutions consultant, or sales, or architect, or things like that are common within employment applications. So you're looking for those terms and grading the application based on those terms. So when we've done that in the past, we've had a grading scale on a SQL table on the server, and then the form is submitted, the process is run, and then it's graded against that, but it's actually being graded in workflow. So the process that you just described can be done. The question is, can it be done entirely within forms? And I actually don't know the answer to that question. I think it may, based on the usage that we've accomplished within the new calculations within forms. But I'm going to have to do some digging on that. That's a great question. But if anyone has any questions on how to grade or assign values to something that isn't inherently available on the form, but using information that exists on the server, let me know. We can talk a little bit more through that process. But I'm going to find out the answer to that question. That's really cool. It's a good idea. Any other questions? Well, Jason said no, so I guess we're going to move on. Just kidding. I'll give one more second for any online users, because every time I've said, okay, we're going to move on, somebody has submitted a question at that exact moment. Oh, but it looks like we're good. Oh, we're good. So next we're going to highlight Laserfiche Mobile. Now, one thing that you'll want to know is that Laserfiche Mobile is now available on all 3 major platforms, which of course are Windows phones, Android phones, and iPhones. I'm going to show views from all of those different applications so that you get a sense and a feel of what these look like. But one of the things that Laserfiche has done is really allowed the mobile app to kind of catch up to what is offered within web access. And what that means is having all the same features for browsing and searching your documents, and also making it a lot easier to capture and import information directly off of your phone, and not just pictures, mind you. So what we're taking a look at here is the Windows version. The buttons are all going to look a little bit different on each operating system, but you'll see that the folder structure is very clear, it's very clean, it's reasonable. You're scrolling through the folder structure very simply, and then of course, just like your the mobile client, I'm sorry, the thick client or the thin client, when you click on a folder, it'll show you all the subfolders beneath it within the same view. And then we've also got our different tasks, which we can see by clicking the 3 lines on the bottom to the far left, the button on the bottom to the far left. So we see the same features like drafts, we see recent uploads, we see offline copies, which I'll get into, but we can also set this up to see starred options. We can also see my history, and there's also this little button called Fill Out Form. So what is that? Obviously, what that does is that brings us to Laserfiche Forms. So a question I get a lot is, how do we interact with forms in the mobile app? Well, the answer is actually through the Laserfiche app. Okay, so there's not even though Forms is a separate software product, there's not a separate app. So you can access Forms as a user in 2 ways. One, through a link that is either available only to you through like an intranet or a VPN, or a publicly accessible form, or you can access it through the mobile app and get to that form immediately. And then you can see that all of your tasks through Forms are all integrated into the Laserfiche mobile app. Some of the tools, like I mentioned, starred, there's recent documents, and then of course I mentioned the Forms task management. But you can also do mobile signatures directly through the app now, either by stamping a pre-uploaded signature or by drawing a signature. And there are also some integrations with certified signature capturing tools like DocuSign that allow you to sign on your mobile device either again by a stamp or by drawing your signature. The difference between just utilizing Laserfiche Mobile and a certified capture tool would simply be the security certification that is attached to each document when you sign through an appropriate software tool. No such certification exists within Laserfiche, and so if you're concerned about auditing your documents and auditing the signatures attached to those documents, you would want to explore a tool that actually attaches those certifications. And we're not going to cover that in great detail today, but anyone that has any questions, feel free to ask us, and I'd be happy to provide that information. Some other additions are being able to capture documents without signing in. So you can actually work on your documents offline now, and that's not necessarily utilizing a check-in or check-out feature, but you can capture information and then put it into the Laserfiche mobile app without being online. So what does this do? It streamlines the process and makes sure that you actually put the information into Laserfiche. I cannot tell you how many times I have taken a picture of a receipt that I intended to upload to an expense report, and it just sat there on my phone because I was on a plane and I couldn't get to my Laserfiche system. I had to just wait until I got on the ground, got a Wi-Fi connection, and then upload it. Well, here, I can drag it into my Laserfiche mobile app and put it there and put it in the place where I intend it to go while I'm offline, and then once it gets back online, click, all is done. You can edit images and documents directly off of your phone, and it's a lot cleaner to do that. You can save documents on your local device from the Laserfiche mobile app, so exporting to your local device, whether it be your phone, tablet, or laptop. And then you can copy to Laserfiche from other applications. If you're using like an expense gathering tool, such as Smart Receipts is a popular one, you can gather all of your information into Smart Receipts and then just copy directly to Laserfiche without having to save to your device in between. Here's a look of quick capture. You see that I can capture a document at the bottom without signing in or access my local documents directly through the app. Here I'm capturing a receipt, and you'll see that I can crop. And when I've finished cropping this, what it'll actually do is it'll flatten the image and bring it up to a screen almost like a scan. So it'll remove the background behind the cropping, and it'll just save that which I cropped, while also flattening it and making it look a lot more presentable for future use, and also a lot easier to capture OCR text off of it. And then we have a couple of options. We can share directly out of the app or save to the repository again directly out of the app. Here's a look of the iPhone app and some of the options that are available there. Obviously, if you're using an iPhone user, this will feel very, very familiar to you. So we can access our different fields, share it to another user, save a copy offline or add a star, as well as within our forms task, which is on the right-hand side, release, reassign, editor, due dates. We can do all of those things directly through the app without needing to access anything on the server or anything on a laptop. So it just makes administration of the system and getting done whatever you need to get done as a user a lot easier through the application. And here's an example of the mobile signatures. If you're utilizing mobile signatures, there's a button down at the bottom that can be placed wherever you need it to be. And then you can see where the user just placed, Julia in this case, just placed a copy of their signature. And then what that looks like over there on the right-hand side. That can be something, again, where you draw it or just stamp it off of a pre-saved image. Any questions on Laserfiche Mobile before we jump into Weblink? Don't worry, Weblink is quick. I know I'm coming up to time. Oh, yes, please.
When you talk about downloading documents from Laserfiche to your mobile device, is that contained within the mobile app then, or is that just available to anyone who can pick up your mobile device and look at some documents that perhaps they should?
That's a great question. So the question was if you download a document to your mobile device, is that still self-contained in the app, or is it available on your phone? And the answer really could be both. A lot of users these days actually have Word and Excel programs right off of their phone, and so what they want to do is they want to pull that document out and then interact with that within the other application, which you absolutely can do. But if we go back, I'll show you this screenshot, we can actually access all of our local documents directly through the app. Okay, so if you want to keep everything accessible only within the app, that's just a structure issue, but you can absolutely do that. And anything that you're accessing within Laserfiche Mobile, obviously if it's not connected to the server, it's not going to upload any information until it's been reconnected. But any changes that you make, if you're utilizing Audit Trail, any changes that you make offline are still being tagged and tracked, and then that information will upload back to Laserfiche once you're back online.
I guess I was looking more towards the security end of things, if people would be downloading documents, and then those documents are on your phone.
Sure. Okay, I see.
And then what happens if you lose that device?
Ooh, that's so. So we've got the issue with security, and then what happens if you lose your device? Can someone just pick that up and what's that?
You have an MDM solution for your remote device. You can use that to remote wipe the device.
You could remote wipe if you have an MDM solution. Not everyone necessarily has access to an MDM solution. Actually, it's a good question in that I'm not sure if, as an administrator, if you can pull that information back if something has been downloaded for access offline. Okay, so one of the things that you have to consider is anything that you're pulling out of Laserfiche, and this is true on the thick client, this is true through Weblink, Web Access, whatever. Okay, if you pull a copy of that out of Laserfiche, it's now outside of Laserfiche. Okay, it can be re-uploaded, the document can be checked back in, and all of that new information, if you've edited or updated it, can be put in place. But it's still outside of Laserfiche. Okay, a copy will remain, but you still have that information on that local device. So the question is, do you want to give users the ability, to, if security is your concern, if you are concerned of users pulling out documents that are sensitive and losing their phone and having someone just find their phone and being able to look up all that information just like a picture, if anyone's browsing through their stuff, what you can do is you can restrict users from downloading documents through the mobile device. So they can still download through the web client or through the thick client, but specifically when they're using mobile, you can restrict their ability to download that information. And all of that is just through your existing security rights. Okay, so it's all still administered through Windows authentication, and it's still administered the way other security rights are administered. Does that answer your question?
Does, yeah.
Awesome. Any other questions online or anyone else in the room? Okay. No. Okay. So we'll go ahead and jump and move on to Weblink 9. There are some really nice changes, and although I know everyone here isn't utilizing Weblink, there are some really nice changes within Weblink 9, and a couple that we kind of get excited about. Aside from the fact that the user interface has been really has been updated, I'm sure a lot of you have gone on and taken a look at other people's web links and kind of been like, well, it's nice, but it's just kind of ugly or not terribly attractive. Certainly some of us have done that, myself included. The user interface is a lot nicer and neater, and you'll notice some nice graphics there. It's a lot easier to upload and interact with graphics within your web link so that you can make it a little more personalized to your organization. It's a small feature, but it's something that we think is important. So you'll notice that the new user interface is very consistent with the updates to web access. So everything's going to look very consistent, but it still has some of those those features that are specific to Weblink. So the way that your metadata looks, the way that the icons look, everything is going to remain pretty consistent, just a lot neater and cleaner. And of course, you still have the ability to see at the very top where you're at within the repository, and then you still have your same search options, although the search options have been updated and are a lot nicer, because the insinuation is that the public is going to be utilizing this information, so you want to make it a lot cleaner. One thing that you can do now in Weblink 9 is actually save searches for the public, so make those types of things available. If you have specific departments that are utilizing Weblink, this is a nice way to basically give them the ability to find information quickly without them having to work through the search logic. You'll notice that the document viewer is larger in relation to the rest of the information on the screen. That is by design. They want the focus to be on the document they're trying to access, so the viewer is going to be a lot larger. And once again, the buttons have been minimized and are much smaller, but in Weblink, that's a little bit less of a concern, seeing as how they're not interacting with the information in a meaningful way. They're usually just viewing it and perhaps downloading it. Big change within Weblink is the ability to stream video and audio directly out of Weblink. If you have audio, or if you're taping and recording your council meetings, if you're recording any meaningful bits of information, and we've got a lot of police departments that are really excited about this, because if you're uploading body cam footage directly to a web link, not with the insinuation of you're sharing it with the public, but just for users that don't have full access into Laserfiche but still need to access that information, they can stream all of that video directly out of Weblink with no issues. So for those of you that have tried to download audio and video out of Laserfiche, you know it's about one of the most painful processes with Laserfiche. You have to download the entire file before you can open it in the application that is native to your device. There's no viewer like there is with a TIFF image within Laserfiche. That is all changed. Now, you can just play it just like a YouTube video directly out of Laserfiche. You can also interact with links, so links to videos in the same way. You can actually have a link to a YouTube video saved as an item within Laserfiche with metadata and all this stuff, and basically just a hyperlink, and then it'll open within the Laserfiche viewer. It's a small change, but I think it's powerful, and a lot of users will probably find it a little bit more feasible to store audio and video of meetings, council meetings, and things like that directly within Laserfiche, and having make that available to the public. That was a really quick dive into Weblink. Any questions there? I can't imagine there's going to be a lot. I'm just going to assume that we don't have any questions online. It's been a very quiet group online so far for my session. I'll take that as a compliment. One other feature that's new in Laserfiche 10 is the ability to import directly via cloud services. So you can import through OneDrive, Google Drive, and any other cloud service. Some of them have to be configured for that specific cloud offering if it's not as popular as OneDrive, Google Drive, but Dropbox, Evernote, these are applications that you can upload to Laserfiche directly from those cloud services now.